They were all seated there, and they came out and made an announcement. They're going to see something wonderful, a great train robbery. And after it was over, they all, in one acclaim, gave it a rousing reception. And I said to myself then, that's it. It's going to be the picture business for me. The future has no end.
So, for the first decade of the 20th century, filmmakers broke out of the studios, escaped the confines of the film laboratories, and went out into the world. They began to photograph their own environment thanks to the innovations of the Lumiere brothers, making a camera that made it possible for them to get creative with what they would turn into movies. However, one thing stayed pretty consistent. The camera pretty much always stayed in one place. But here, in 1905, we see cinematographer Billy Bitzer giving the camera a completely new identity. Yeah, we kinda saw this in The Great Train Robbery. There was a camera mounted onto a train, showing us that we could get more dynamic shots by putting the camera on something that is actually moving. But in this shot, you could still see the train. However, in this short film, simply titled New York Subway, the camera is on a train and glides down the tracks, like a phantom gliding along. So it becomes more than just a camera on a train. It feels like the viewer themselves is gliding down the tracks. Bitzer wasn't the first person to do this, but he did innovate in some ways. He would later become the cinematographer of Broken Blossoms, a film from 1919 directed by W.D. Griffith. So Bitzer's also an example of an early filmmaker who becomes an official cinematographer later on in film history. This version of The Night Before Christmas is a very theatrical but also very imaginative adaptation. With Biograp's output, we're starting to see the building of a studio system. What will become the factory-like machine of Hollywood is beginning to pick up steam. Pathé Studios in France are producing up to 500 shorts a year, and Pathé eventually develop what will become known as the newsreel, a concept that will play in movie theaters for the next half of the century.
Jeepers, another stupid newsreel. I hate the news.
With both Pathé and Gaumont, it's hard to deny France's role at this time as the leader of cinematic output. This year alone starts a boom for France as a country that continues until World War I as the leaders in film production in the world. 1905 is also the year that Max Linder would make his film debut in a Pathé comedy. Afterwards, Linder would go on to be one of the most famous silent stars in France, and would be hugely influential to Charlie Chaplin. Another one of Pathé's most successful directors is Gaston Vallet, who was an apprentice of the Lumiere brothers, and whose special effects films are starting to rival those of Georges Méliès. At the same time, Gaumont Studios produce a film about Spain, directed by Alice Guy, who I'll discuss more in depth in another episode. There's also a version of The Great Train Robbery that comes out this year, with little kids as all of the characters, which kind of feels like a precursor to The Little Rascals. It's also another example of the concept of the spin-off movie being as old as cinema itself. I think you could also argue that this is kind of a parody as well. Either way, it's pretty weird. This film, The Weavers, shot by the Manish brothers, was the first film shot in Southern Europe and is of their 114-year-old grandmother. That means we actually have on film someone who was born in 1791. The first film made in Italy, The Capture of Roma, begins what will just in a few years become a big business of super spectacles. And even as early as 1905, the debate over pornography versus art seems to be as old as film itself. But either way, I think it's important just as a reminder that we're in between cinema being a cheap exploitive novelty and it becoming a serious industrial artistic venture. Even something as simple as the Magician film, which Georges Méliès started, is getting more sophisticated. This Pathé film doesn't bother with a wide shot of the magician. It forsakes the showmanship of the stage, and instead just shows you a close-up of the trick, giving it sort of an absurdist, almost surrealist edge. Though 1905 might be lacking in some really broad steps forward, one thing is for sure, cinema is not slowing down. There's a more diverse range of films being made, and it's only going to speed up from here. And pretty soon we'll start to see just how progressive the tool of cinema can be.